One fateful night, Jacob sat on the edge of his bed, staring anxiously at his phone. His father had been working late, as usual, leaving Jacob alone at home with his younger sister, Patricia. Tonight, however, something was different. Something was terribly wrong. Jacob had heard strange noises coming from Patricia's room earlier that evening, thuds against the wall and unsettling murmurs that didn't sound like his sister's voice. When he went to check, what he saw chilled him to his core. Patricia had been standing in the middle of her room, her head hitting the wall in a steady rhythm, her mouth moving in ways that didn't seem natural. Her arms twisted and flailed in jerky, unnatural movements, like her body was no longer her own. Fear overwhelmed Jacob, and he did the only thing he could think of. He slammed her door shut and locked it from the outside. Still shaking, he messaged his dad to explain what was happening. When his dad responded, his concern was immediate. Jacob explained everything he had seen, from the banging and strange language to the unnatural movements. His dad tried to rationalize it at first, asking if Patricia might be sick or having some sort of episode. But Jacob's description left no room for doubt. This was something far beyond the ordinary. As his dad asked more questions, a memory struck him. He reminded Jacob of a strange book he had found days earlier, an old, leather-bound tome that Jacob had casually mentioned discovering in the attic. The book had an eerie quality to it, with a distinct marking on one of its pages, the number 666. His dad had told him to throw it away immediately, but Jacob hadn't. Instead, curiosity had gotten the better of him. Jacob confessed that not only had he kept the book, but he had also read a page aloud, words written in Latin that he didn't understand. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now he realized Patricia had been in the room with him when he read those words. A sinking feeling hit Jacob's father as he pieced it together. The words Jacob had read were likely a spell, and somehow, Patricia had become its victim. His dad told him there might be a way to reverse it. If Jacob could find the same page and read the words backward, it could break the spell. Jacob's heart raced as he bolted toward his desk, where the book still sat. The old, tattered cover seemed to pulse with an unseen energy as he grabbed it and sprinted toward Patricia's room. The hallway felt unnaturally quiet, the air thick with tension. When he reached her door, he hesitated. The sounds inside had stopped. For a moment, he considered turning back, but he knew he had to face whatever lay beyond. He unlocked the door and pushed it open cautiously. What he saw made his blood run cold. Patricia stood in the center of the room, but she was no longer the little sister he knew. Her face was pale, and her eyes were completely white, glowing faintly in the dim light. A deep, guttural growl escaped her lips as she turned to face him. Jacob felt his legs weaken, but he forced himself to step inside, clutching the book tightly. Patricia's movements were erratic, almost animalistic, as she began to approach him. Jacob's hands shook as he flipped through the pages, searching desperately for the one with the Latin text. Patricia let out a shriek that pierced the air, sending a shiver down his spine. She lunged at him, but he darted to the side, narrowly avoiding her grasp. Finally, he found the page. The strange symbols seemed to writhe on the paper, as if alive. Jacob's voice trembled as he began to read the words backward, each syllable feeling heavier than the last. Patricia froze mid-step, her body convulsing violently. Her screams grew louder, echoing through the room as she clawed at the air, as though fighting an invisible force. The room grew colder with each passing second, the walls seeming to close in. Lights flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that danced around them. Jacob's voice grew louder, stronger, as he forced himself to continue reading. Patricia's body thrashed uncontrollably, her screams mixing with guttural noises that didn't sound human. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the chaos stopped. Patricia collapsed to the floor, her breathing shallow but steady. Jacob dropped the book and knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face as he gently shook her shoulder. Slowly, Patricia opened her eyes. They were no longer white, they were back to normal. Her voice was weak but clear as she whispered, "Jacob?" What happened? Relief flooded through him. Patricia was back. He had done it. Jacob quickly told his dad that Patricia was okay now. His father, though relieved, warned him to destroy the book immediately. Jacob didn't argue. He took the book outside, grabbed lighter fluid, and burned it. As the flames roared to life, he stood there, watching the pages curl and blacken until the book was nothing but ash. Lydia was a typical 13-year-old girl. But for the past few weeks, she had been hearing something strange, soft, indistinct whispers that seemed to echo inside her mind. At first, the whispers were too faint to understand, like the rustling of leaves on a distant tree. She thought it was her imagination, a trick of the mind, or perhaps even the lingering effect of too many scary stories at night. But as time passed, the whispers began to grow louder, and the words became clearer. The voice wasn't just noise anymore, it was speaking to her. It wasn't commanding her outright but gently suggesting, coaxing her, as if it was planting ideas in her mind. The words, though simple, unsettled her deeply. "Set them free, Lydia. Set them free." Confused and frightened, Lydia decided to confide in her mom, hoping for comfort or at least an explanation for the voice that wouldn't leave her alone. One evening, while they were sitting in the kitchen, Lydia finally mustered the courage to speak. "Mom," she began hesitantly, her voice trembling, "I've been hearing a voice." Her mom looked up from the pile of dishes she was rinsing and furrowed her brow. "What do you mean, a voice? Like, someone talking to you?" Lydia nodded, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "It's in my head," she whispered, her voice almost cracking. "It says things, scary things. It says I need to set people free." Her mom paused, wiping her hands on a dishcloth, and knelt down to face Lydia. "Who is the voice telling you to set free, honey?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. Lydia shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know, Mom," she admitted. "I don't even know who it is, but it feels real." Her mom gave a soft, reassuring smile and pulled Lydia into a hug. "Sweetheart, it's not real. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. Sometimes we hear things when we're tired or stressed. Whenever you hear that voice again, just ignore it, okay? It'll go away." Lydia nodded weakly, but deep down, she knew her mom was wrong. The voice wasn't a trick. It wasn't her imagination. It was real, and it was growing stronger. That evening, her mom left for her night shift at work, leaving Lydia in charge of watching over her younger sister, Mary. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Lydia and Mary played together for a while, but as the night wore on, Lydia became restless. The voice had returned, louder and more persistent than ever before. "It's time, Lydia," it said. "Set her free. You'll be helping her. She'll thank you for it. You'll see." Lydia pressed her hands against her ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was useless. The voice wasn't coming from outside, it was inside her head, weaving its way into her thoughts like a dark thread. She felt her resolve weakening. The voice wasn't wrong, was it? Mary was always so anxious, so scared of everything. Maybe setting her free really would make her happier. Maybe it was the right thing to do. Later that evening, her mom received an unexpected call while finishing up her shift. Seeing Lydia's name flash on the screen, she quickly picked up, her heart skipping a beat. "Hi, sweetie," she said. "Is everything okay? I'll be home soon." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Lydia's voice came through, quiet but unnervingly steady. "Mom," she said softly, "I did it." Her mom frowned, confused. "Did what, honey?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. Lydia's next words sent a chill down her spine. Remember the voice I told you about? It's real, Mom. It told me what to do, and I did it. Lydia, her mom said firmly, her voice tinged with rising panic, whatever you think you're hearing isn't real. We talked about this. It's just your imagination. No, Mom, Lydia interrupted, her tone unwavering. It's real. I can hear it so clearly now. It told me to set her free. Set who free? Her mom asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Mary, Lydia replied, her voice eerily calm. She's free now, Mom. She's happier. She's better. No more pain, no more fear. I set her free. Her mom's breath caught in her throat. Lydia, she said, her voice shaking, what are you talking about? Where is Mary? She's here with me, Lydia said simply. She looks so peaceful now. You'll see, Mom. I did the right thing. Realizing something was horribly wrong, her mom dropped everything and rushed to her car, barely able to hold the phone steady as she told Lydia to stay where she was. Her hands trembled as she drove home, her mind racing with every worst-case scenario imaginable. When she finally burst through the front door, she stopped in her tracks, horror washing over her like a tidal wave. There, in the living room, stood Lydia, clutching a bloodied knife in her hands. Her clothes were stained red, and her face wore a serene, almost angelic expression. On the floor lay Mary, her tiny body motionless, her eyes closed as if she were merely sleeping. See, Mom? Lydia said, her voice soft and filled with an unnerving innocence. I set her free. Tears streamed down her mom's face as she struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. Lydia, she choked out, put the knife down. Please. But Lydia's expression darkened, and her grip on the knife tightened. The voice says you're next, Mom, she said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. It says I have to set you free too. Her mom backed away, heart pounding, as Lydia lunged toward her, the knife glinting in the dim light. Summoning every ounce of strength, she managed to wrestle the knife from Lydia's grasp, pinning her arms down as tears streamed down both their faces. Lydia, she sobbed, holding her daughter close despite the struggle, please, stop. This isn't you. I'm going to help you. We're going to fix this. I promise. But deep down, she knew, whatever was speaking to Lydia wasn't going to let go so easily. Vivian was in desperate need of a place to stay for the night. After calling every contact she could think of, she finally reached out to her close friend Jessica. Jessica, who was away on an extended expedition and wouldn't be home for at least a week, generously offered her house as a temporary haven. There's a spare key under the mat, Jessica explained over the phone. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Just make yourself comfortable. Relieved and grateful, Vivian wasted no time, packed up her belongings, and made her way to Jessica's house, thankful for her friend's kindness and trusting offer. Upon arriving at the house, Vivian retrieved the key from beneath the mat, just as Jessica had instructed. The key felt unusually cold in her hand, almost as if the metal itself carried a chill that seeped into her skin, but she brushed the thought aside, attributing it to the cool evening air. She stepped inside, turned on a few lights, and immediately felt a strange sense of unease, a sensation she couldn't quite explain, as if the house were silently watching her every move. Still, she dismissed her feelings as the natural discomfort of staying alone in an unfamiliar place. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed to amplify every tiny sound. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the living room, and the soft shuffle of her own movements filled the silence, but none of it seemed enough to drown out the heaviness in the air. Vivian shook her head, trying to dispel the creeping paranoia settling over her. You're just tired, she muttered under her breath, her voice barely louder than a whisper. It's just an old house." After settling into the guest room, Vivian tried to distract herself by unpacking her belongings and scrolling aimlessly through her phone. She reassured herself repeatedly that she was safe. As the hours crept closer to midnight, the house seemed to grow eerily quiet, with only the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards breaking the stillness. She told herself it was an old house, and old houses made noises. Yet, there was something about the silence that felt unnatural, as though the air itself was heavier, pressing down on her chest. Just as she began to drift off to sleep, a faint noise caught her attention, a soft, almost rhythmic thumping sound, as though something, or someone, was moving around elsewhere in the house. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like a heartbeat that refused to be ignored. Her pulse quickened as she sat upright, straining her ears to catch the sound. It came again, a little louder this time, and closer. Trying to calm her nerves, Vivian told herself it was probably just the wind or the house settling. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that crawled up her spine and settled at the base of her neck. Deciding she wouldn't be able to sleep without knowing for sure, she cautiously stepped out of the guest room, clutching her phone in one hand like a lifeline. Room by room, she searched the house, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Each room she entered was exactly as she had left it, neat, undisturbed, and empty. The silence of each room felt oppressive, like a warning she couldn't decipher. But the noise persisted, now sounding like it was coming from below. Her heart sank as she realized it was coming from the basement. Frightened but determined, Vivian called Jessica. "Hey, Jess, I don't mean to bother you," she began, her voice trembling, "but I keep hearing these noises inside the house. It's coming from the basement. Do you know what it could be?" Jessica's voice was calm but firm, almost too calm, as she replied, "Listen to me, Vivian. Whatever you do, do not go to the basement. Just ignore the noise." Vivian froze in place, her anxiety spiking. "What do you mean, don't go to the basement? What's down there?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper now. Her free hand tightened into a fist, her fingernails digging into her palm. Jessica hesitated for a moment, then sighed heavily. "There's something I need to tell you," she admitted, her tone shifting to one of unease. "I don't want to scare you, but there's a history with the house. Years ago, there was a girl named Hannah who lived there with her parents. She was just a teenager, but something happened to her, something terrible. People say she became possessed by a demon, and one night, she snapped. She murdered her parents in cold blood, right there in the house, and then, she killed herself in the basement." Jessica paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Vivian's blood ran cold as she processed what she'd just heard. "Wait, what?" Vivian exclaimed, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me this before I came here? Why would you let me stay here, knowing all of this? I thought it was over." Jessica defended herself, her voice filled with regret. "It's been years since anything strange happened. The last time was 2 years ago, and I thought it was done. I'm so sorry, Vivian. I never would have let you stay there if I knew it would start again." Vivian's mind raced as she gripped her phone tightly, the weight of Jessica's words sinking in. The faint noise from the basement suddenly grew louder, the rhythmic thumps quickening as if in response to her rising fear. It was as if whatever was in the basement knew she was still there. Her breathing grew shallow, her chest tightening with panic. She turned toward the front door, her breath hitching. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, but she hesitated for a second too long. A chilling whisper echoed faintly through the air. It was unmistakable, a voice, distant yet distinct, calling her name. Without wasting another moment, Vivian grabbed her bag and bolted for the door, not daring to look back. Her trembling hands fumbled with the lock, but she managed to fling the door open and step outside into the cool night air. The moment she crossed the threshold, the whispers began, faint, distorted voices emanating from the house, too soft to understand but unmistakably there. Vivian didn't stop running until she was far, far away.